The living room smelled like vanilla candles and fresh betrayal. My mother sat perfectly still on the cream sofa, hands folded like she was posing for a portrait. My father stood by the window, staring at the street outside. Neither of them looked at me. That was the first sign this conversation had been rehearsed. "Iris," my mother began, her voice unnaturally calm, "we've made a decision about the family's future." I sat across from them, my stomach already twisting into knots. Something about the air in the room felt final. This wasn't going to be a discussion. It was going to be an announcement. "We're removing you from the family accounts," my father said, still facing the window. "Your trust fund access ends today. We've already processed the paperwork." The words landed like stones in still water. I waited for the explanation, the anger, the reason. But there was only practiced calm. "This is about Violet's reputation," my mother continued, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her skirt. "What happened last month raised questions. People are talking. Violet is interviewing for the scholarship committee position next week. We can't have complications attached to our family name right now." I stared at them, my brain struggling to process what I was hearing. They weren't even pretending this was about truth or justice. This was about appearances. About protecting the golden child from uncomfortable questions. "So you're disowning me," I said, my voice flat. "We're creating necessary distance," my father corrected, finally turning around. His face showed no emotion. "For everyone's benefit." My mother nodded in agreement, her expression perfectly neutral. They had practiced this moment. They had decided my fate before I ever walked into this room. My mother reached for a folded paper on the side table. She slid it across the coffee table toward me without making eye contact. I picked it up, hands shaking slightly. It was a script. Actual bullet points telling me what to say if anyone asked questions. "You're pursuing independent opportunities," my mother read aloud, as if I couldn't read the words myself. "You've decided to take time for personal growth. You and Violet are on different paths right now, but you support her dreams completely." Each sentence was designed to erase me quietly. No drama. No scandal. Just a smooth disappearance that wouldn't raise eyebrows or start conversations. "What if someone asks about what happened last month?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You don't engage," my father said firmly. "You redirect the conversation. You say it's complicated and private. If you make this messy, Iris, you'll only damage yourself further." I looked at Violet, sitting in the armchair by the bookshelf. She hadn't spoken a single word since I arrived. She was scrolling through her phone, her face completely blank. Not guilty, not sad, not even uncomfortable, just bored. "Violet," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "Do you have anything you want to say to me?" She glanced up briefly, then back at her screen. Her fingers kept moving across the glass. "I think Mom and Dad are being fair," she said quietly. "This situation is hard for everyone involved." Fair. The word felt like poison in my ears. My mother folded her hands again, the gesture so controlled it looked robotic. "We're doing this because we love both of you. One day, when emotions aren't so high, you'll understand our reasoning." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just stood up and walked out of the room, leaving the script on the coffee table. Packed one duffel bag. Clothes, my laptop, a few books I couldn't leave behind. I didn't take photos from my walls or sentimental items from my shelves. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of thinking I cared enough to be sentimental. But my hands trembled as I zipped the bag closed. When I checked my phone, I discovered I was already gone from their digital world. The family group chat had vanished from my messages like it never existed. My access to the shared family calendar was revoked. I tried logging into the bank account my parents had opened for me during college. Access denied. Password changed. They had moved with military efficiency. I called my mother, my fingers tight around the phone. She answered immediately, as if she had been waiting. "You've already locked me out of everything," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. We thought a clean break would be easier, she replied. No hesitation. No apology in her tone. Your father transferred some money to your personal account. Enough to get started somewhere new. But Iris, you need to understand this is temporary. If you cooperate and stay quiet, we can discuss bringing you back into the family in a few months. Cooperate. Stay quiet. Let Violet's moment shine without shadows. What happens if I don't cooperate? Asked. There was a long pause on the other end. Then, in a voice that was almost kind, she said, Then you've made your choice about where you stand. The line went dead. I sat on my bed in the apartment I could no longer afford and stared at the blank wall across from me. The quiet efficiency of their erasure hurt more than any screaming match ever could have. The story about me spread faster than I thought possible. Within a week, I started hearing whispers through mutual friends. Not direct accusations. Just concerned observations that painted me as the problem. I heard Iris is going through something difficult right now. Apparently there are some jealousy issues with her sister. She always seemed intense, you know? Like she tried too hard. None of it was openly cruel. That was the genius of their strategy. It was concerned enough to sound caring. Worried family trying to help troubled daughter. A narrative that made perfect sense to people who didn't know the real story. I ran into Mrs. Calloway at the grocery store on a Tuesday afternoon. She had babysat Violet and me when we were kids. She approached me with a sad, pitying smile that made my skin crawl. Your mother mentioned you're taking some personal time, she said gently, touching my arm. I think that's really brave, honey. Sometimes we all need space to work through difficult feelings. Work through my feelings. As if I was the one who needed fixing. What exactly did my mother tell you? Asked, keeping my voice neutral. Mrs. Calloway's smile faltered slightly. Just that you and Violet had some disagreements. That you needed distance to process your emotions. She said you've been under tremendous stress lately. I nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. Stress, disagreements, process. All gentle words that hid the knife. Right, I said. Thank you for understanding. She squeezed my arm sympathetically before walking toward the produce section. I stood there holding a bag of apples, watching her leave, and realized how easy it was to rewrite someone's entire existence. 3 weeks after being disowned, I sat in my cramped studio apartment scrolling through old photos on my laptop. I wasn't looking for anything specific. My mind just felt restless, unmoored from everything I used to know as stable. Then I saw it. A screenshot I had saved from 2 years ago, forgotten until this moment. It was a group text between me, Violet, and my mother, discussing plans for Violet's college graduation party. I had suggested inviting some of her college friends, including someone named Troy who had been in her study group. Violet's response had been immediate and sharp. Don't invite Troy. He's weird and intense. I don't want him anywhere near my party. My mother had agreed instantly. If Violet's uncomfortable, we absolutely won't invite him. I remembered that conversation vividly because Troy had shown up at the party anyway. Violet had been furious, her face red with anger. She accused me of inviting him behind her back to sabotage her celebration. I denied it repeatedly. I told her I hadn't even contacted him. But Violet insisted I had betrayed her trust, and my parents believed her version without question. The argument had been brutal and exhausting. Violet cried until her mascara ran. My mother accused me of being spiteful and jealous of my sister's success. My father said I was deliberately trying to ruin Violet's special day. I apologized just to make the fighting stop, even though I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. But now, staring at that old screenshot, a question formed in my mind that I had never asked before. If Violet didn't want Troy there, and I didn't invite him, then who did? I opened my archived messages and started searching through old conversations, my heart beating faster. Took me nearly an hour of searching, but I finally found it. A text thread between my mother and Troy's mother from exactly 2 years ago. My mother had personally invited Troy to the graduation party. She had added his name to the guest list without telling anyone in the family. I scrolled further down the conversation, my hands shaking. There was another message, sent the day after the party, after all the screaming and accusations had ended. "I'm so sorry about yesterday's confusion," my mother had written to Troy's mother. Iris was supposed to check with Violet before extending any invitations. This is an important learning moment for her about respecting boundaries. A learning moment. I sat back against my wall, staring at the screen until my eyes burned. My mother had known the truth all along. She had orchestrated the entire situation. And when Violet accused me, my mother chose silence over honesty. She let me take the blame, let me apologize for something I didn't do, let my relationship with Violet fracture over a lie. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a mistake. This was deliberate sacrifice. My reputation for Violet's emotional comfort. I took screenshots of everything and saved them in 3 different locations. I uploaded them to a secure cloud account. I emailed them to myself. I wasn't sure what I would do with this evidence yet, but I knew with absolute certainty that I wouldn't let it disappear. My phone rang at 9 o'clock on a Thursday evening. Violet's name appeared on the screen. I almost declined the call, but curiosity made me answer. "Hey," she said, her voice bright and casual. Too casual. "How have you been?" "Fine," I said, my tone deliberately flat. "What do you want, Violet?" She laughed softly like I had made a joke. "I just wanted to check in. I know things have been really weird between us lately." Weird. That was certainly one way to describe being disowned. "Mom and Dad are worried about you," she continued without waiting for my response. "They think you're isolating yourself on purpose. I told them you just need time to adjust. You know how you get when things change." How I get. As if my reaction to being erased was a personality flaw. "Violet," I said slowly, choosing my words carefully, "do you actually believe the story they're telling people about me?" There was a pause. When she spoke again, her voice was more measured. "I think things got complicated. And I think if you just let it go and move forward, everything will settle down naturally. People forget drama, Iris. They always do." "Let it go," I repeated. "Yeah," she said, and I could hear relief creeping into her voice. "I mean, what's the point of dragging everything out? It doesn't help anyone. And honestly, you staying quiet right now would really help me. I'm interviewing for that committee position, and people keep asking questions about family stuff." Something cold settled in my chest. She wasn't calling to apologize or reconcile. She was calling to manage me, to make sure I stayed silent and cooperative. "So this will all blow over," I said, "as long as I don't say anything that contradicts your version." "Exactly," she said, genuine relief flooding her voice now. "I knew you'd understand eventually." I hung up without saying goodbye, my hands clenched into fists. I called my parents the next morning before I could lose my nerve. My father answered on the 3rd ring. "I want one thing," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Just between us, privately. I want you to admit that I didn't invite Troy to Violet's graduation party. Have the messages. I know you know the truth." The silence on the other end stretched out so long I thought the call had dropped. "Iris," my father finally said, his voice tired and flat, "what does any of that matter now? It was 2 years ago. Ancient history." "It matters because you let me be blamed for something I didn't do," I said. "And now you're doing exactly the same thing again." "We're not going to do this," he said, his tone sharpening. "You're not going to rewrite history just to make yourself feel better about current circumstances." "I'm not rewriting anything," I said, fighting to keep my voice level. "I'm asking you to tell the truth for once." "The truth," he said slowly, deliberately, "is that Violet needed protection. And you were strong enough to handle being the scapegoat. That's what family does for each other. That's what love looks like sometimes." I felt like all the air had been sucked from the room. "So you chose her," I said. "We chose what was best for everyone involved," he replied without hesitation. "And if you can't see that, then maybe this distance between us is necessary and healthy." He hung up before I could respond. I sat on my couch, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dead silence, and realized something fundamental. Reconciliation wasn't possible. Not because they didn't care about me, but because protecting their image mattered more than correcting the lie. The invitations stopped arriving in my inbox. Group hangouts I used to be automatically included in simply disappeared from my calendar. Friends I had known since high school stopped responding to my messages. At first, I convinced myself I was being paranoid, seeing patterns that weren't really there. But after the third coffee date got cancelled at the last minute and the fifth text went unanswered, I finally understood what was happening. I had been quietly removed from the social circle, not because people actively hated me, but because my presence was complicated now. And complicated wasn't convenient for anyone. I went to the bookstore on a Saturday afternoon and ran into Paige, someone I had been close with in college. She saw me, smiled automatically, and then her smile wavered and became uncertain. She approached slowly, like someone approaching an injured animal. "Hey Iris," she said carefully, her voice pitched higher than normal. "How are you doing?" "I'm okay," I said, even though it wasn't true. "How about you?" "Good. Really busy with work." She shifted her bag awkwardly on her shoulder. "I heard through people that you're taking some time off from everything. From family stuff." "Something like that," I said. She nodded, her eyes not quite meeting mine. "That's probably healthy, honestly. You know, creating space and boundaries and all that." We stood there in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Then she glanced at her phone like she had just received an urgent message. "I should actually go," she said quickly. "But hey, really take care of yourself, okay? I hope things get better." She left before I could say anything else. I bought a book I didn't even want and walked home through cold rain. For the first time, I truly understood how reputation quietly controlled social survival. It didn't require cruelty or drama, just careful distance. 2 months after my family disowned me, I received a message from someone I barely remembered. His name was Kyle. We had attended the same high school but hadn't spoken in probably 5 years. "Hey Iris," his message read. "I know this is completely random, but I heard some stuff about you and your sister recently. I don't know if any of it's actually true, but something about the whole thing didn't sit right with me. If you ever want to talk about it, I'm around." I stared at the message for several minutes, reading it over and over. It was the first time since everything happened that someone had reached out without pity in their voice or judgment in their words. Just honest doubt about the official story. I typed back, "What exactly did you hear?" His reply came quickly. "That you've been spreading rumors about Violet because you're jealous of her success. That you're trying to sabotage her opportunities. But I remember you from high school and that doesn't sound anything like the person you were. So I figured I'd just ask you directly instead of believing gossip." I sat back against my couch cushions, something warm and unexpected spreading through my chest. Someone remembered me differently than the version my family was selling to everyone. "It's way more complicated than that," I typed carefully. "But no, I'm not spreading rumors or trying to hurt anyone. I'm just not playing along with their version of events anymore." "Good," he wrote back immediately. "You shouldn't have to pretend everything is fine when it isn't." It was such a small thing. Just a simple message from someone I barely knew. But it made me feel less alone than I had felt in months. A week after Kyle's message, another person reached out unexpectedly. Her name was Bridget, and she had been close friends with Violet during middle school before they drifted apart in high school. "I need to tell you something," her message said. "And I should have told you years ago, but I was too scared." We agreed to meet for coffee. When I arrived, Bridget was already sitting at a corner table, nervously tearing a napkin into tiny pieces. "Do you remember when Violet accused you of stealing her bracelet in 8th grade?" she asked before I even sat down. I nodded slowly, the memory sharp and painful. The bracelet had been expensive, a gift from our grandmother. Violet had sworn I took it out of spite and jealousy. I was grounded for an entire month. The bracelet never turned up, and I never touched it. She hid it herself, Bridget said quietly, her voice shaking. She told me she did it because you were getting too much attention from your parents. She wanted them to focus on her instead. I watched her put it in the back of her closet, behind her shoe boxes. I stared at Bridget, my mind struggling to process what she was saying. Why didn't you say anything back then? I was 12 years old, she said, tears forming in her eyes. And Violet told me if I said anything to anyone, she would make sure nobody believed me. She said she'd turn all our friends against me. So I stayed quiet. But I felt guilty about it every single day since then. The pattern was suddenly undeniable. This wasn't new behavior from Violet. This was a system she had been using for years. Thank you for telling me now, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I'm so sorry I didn't say something sooner. I should have been braver. I wasn't angry at Bridget. I was angry at how easy it had been to silence a 12-year-old girl into carrying guilt for years. My parents called 3 days later. My mother's voice was sharp and cold in a way I had rarely heard before. We heard you've been talking to people, she said without any greeting. Asking questions about old incidents. Digging up stories from years ago. I'm not digging anything up, I said calmly. People are coming to me on their own and telling me things. Well, it needs to stop immediately, my father cut in, his voice harsh. You're not going to rewrite history, Iris. What happened in the past is done. If you keep pushing this narrative, you're only going to hurt yourself more. Hurt myself, I repeated. Or hurt Violet's carefully constructed image. Both, my mother said sharply. Do you honestly think people want to hear about family drama from a decade ago? You'll look bitter and obsessed and unstable. Is that really the reputation you want for yourself? I could hear something underneath their anger. Something that sounded like fear. I'm not rewriting anything, I said. I'm just not erasing the truth anymore to make everyone else comfortable. Then you're making a serious mistake, my father said. A mistake you'll regret. The line went dead. I sat in the silence of my apartment and felt strangely calm wash over me. For the first time since this began, I wasn't afraid of their warnings or threats. Violet texted me a week later. The message was long and carefully crafted, every word chosen deliberately. I know things have been incredibly hard lately, she wrote. And I know Mom and Dad didn't handle the situation perfectly. I'm not going to pretend everything was done right. But I also think we need to find a way to move forward instead of backwards. Holding on to past hurts doesn't help anyone heal. I'm sorry if you feel hurt by how things went down. I really am. But exposing everything publicly now would hurt both of us, not just me. Can't we just let the past stay in the past? I read the message 3 times, analyzing every sentence. It sounded like an apology on the surface. But it absolutely wasn't. I'm sorry if you feel hurt. Not, I'm sorry for hurting you. Exposing everything. Not talking honestly about what actually happened. She was admitting vaguely that things were handled poorly, but she wasn't owning her part in any of it. She wasn't taking responsibility. She was managing me like a crisis that needed containment. I didn't respond to her message. An hour later she texted again. Please, Iris. I'm really trying to fix this. I typed back one sentence. You're trying to protect yourself, not fix what's broken between us. She didn't reply after that. I stopped trying to make them understand my perspective. I finally accepted that reconciliation wasn't possible without honesty. And honesty would require them to admit they had deliberately sacrificed me for Violet's comfort and reputation. They were never going to do that. So I let go of the hope that they would suddenly change. I released the fantasy of a tearful family reunion where they apologized and we rebuilt trust together. That wasn't going to happen. Instead, I focused entirely on what I could actually control. My own story. My own truth. My own future. I wasn't going to beg for their understanding anymore. I wasn't going to make myself smaller to fit into their comfortable narrative. I started writing everything down methodically. Not for revenge. Not to attack them publicly. just to have a clear record that couldn't be disputed. Screenshots of messages, summaries of conversations, names of witnesses who confirmed my version of events. If they tried to rewrite my story again, I would have documented proof they couldn't dismiss or ignore. I organized everything into a detailed timeline. The Troy graduation party incident, the stolen bracelet from 8th grade, the disownment conversation, every phone call, every warning they had issued. I saved screenshots in multiple locations, forwarded important emails to a separate secure account, and backed everything up in cloud storage. I wasn't planning to make anything public. Not yet anyway. But I wanted to be completely ready if that moment came. Cal texted me one afternoon out of nowhere. "Hey, are you doing okay?" "I'm surviving," I wrote back honestly. "Good," he replied. "For what it's worth, I believe your version of everything." It was such a small gesture of support. But somehow it mattered more than I could explain. Violet posted something on social media a few weeks later. It was a long, emotional caption about family and forgiveness and personal growth. She talked about how difficult it was to navigate complicated relationships, how she had learned the importance of setting healthy boundaries, how she was choosing inner peace over external conflict. The comments section filled rapidly with supportive messages. "You're so mature. This takes real strength. Family situations are always so complicated." But one comment stood out sharply from the rest. "Wait, didn't you post something last year about how incredibly close you were with your sister? What changed?" Violet deleted that comment within minutes. But I had already taken a screenshot of it. The cracks in her carefully constructed narrative were starting to show to other people, not just me. My mother called 2 days after Violet's post. Her voice was tight with barely controlled tension. "Violet needs your help with something," she said without any pleasantries. "People are asking questions about why you're absent from family events and photos. It's making her look bad in front of important people. We need you to post something supportive on social media. Just once. Photo together a nice comment about her. Something that shows you're on good terms." "No," I said simply. "Iris, please. This is really important. It's one single post." "No," I repeated, my voice firm. "You're being incredibly selfish," she snapped, her careful control slipping. "This isn't about you and your feelings. It's about protecting the entire family's reputation." "I'm not part of the family anymore," I said calmly. "You made that extremely clear 2 months ago." She hung up without another word. I felt no guilt about refusing. Only a strange sense of relief. I decided to share my story. Not on mainstream social media where my family would see it immediately, but in a blog post on a platform I had used back in college for creative writing. It was technically anonymous, but the details were specific enough that anyone who knew our family would recognize the situation. I didn't use real names. I didn't exaggerate or add dramatic flourishes. I just wrote exactly what had happened. The disownment, the lies they spread about me, the pattern of behavior going back years. I ended the post with one simple line. I was erased from my family to protect someone else's image. I'm done staying quiet about it. I hit publish and immediately closed my laptop, my heart pounding. Within 24 hours, the post had been shared over 200 times. People started asking my family direct questions. Not me, but them. "Is it true you cut off your daughter completely? What really happened with Iris? The story keeps changing. Why isn't she in any recent family photos?" My parents couldn't answer these questions without contradicting themselves. If they claimed I was mentally unstable, people asked why they hadn't gotten me professional help. If they said the separation was mutual, people asked why I was the only one who had to leave. Their carefully maintained silence became suspicious instead of dignified. Violet's scholarship committee position fell through unexpectedly. She posted about it vaguely on social media, saying the timing wasn't quite right for her. But I heard through Kyle, who had a friend on the committee, that they had received questions about Violet's character, about family dynamics and credibility. Other opportunities began quietly disappearing from her life. Not because of anything I said directly, but because lies can't survive sustained scrutiny from multiple directions. My father called me late one night. His voice sounded different than usual. Tired. Defeated. "We chose her," he said quietly, without any preamble. "We chose to protect Violet because she needed us more. You were always stronger, more independent, more capable of handling difficulty. We thought you could handle being the one who got hurt." It wasn't an apology. It was just an explanation. A justification. "I shouldn't have had to handle it at all," I said, my voice steady. "I was your daughter too." "I know," he said softly. And then the line went dead. I responded to my family with boundaries, not rage or revenge. I told them clearly that I wasn't interested in rebuilding a relationship that was built on lies and required my silence. I told them I wouldn't carry blame that had never been mine to carry. They stopped calling after that. I rebuilt my life piece by piece. New apartment in a different neighborhood. New job that had nothing to do with my family's connections. New daily routines that didn't involve checking their social media. I stopped waiting for an apology that would never come. I built something real that didn't require their approval or validation. Violet gradually disappeared from public view. No dramatic announcement or explanation. No closure or redemption arc. Just slow, quiet absence. I didn't feel victorious or triumphant. I just felt exhausted and ready to move forward. I learned something crucial through everything that happened. I wasn't disowned for lying or being difficult. I was disowned for knowing the truth and refusing to bury it to protect someone else. Losing my family cost me less than losing myself would have. And in the end, that realization was enough to build a new life on.